Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. I'm back flying solo for the second half of the defense show against the Jaguars. Gianna Ann was with us for the first show. Go back and give that a download. It's a good listen, and she has some very interesting things to say about the Ravens locker room, about her take on the slot corner situation, and what's going on with Kyle Hamilton, where he might be most useful. Why the Ravens might not have been willing to go to Daryl Worley in this game when Marcus Williams went down, but a few different things. And she had some interesting points to make about that. Want to welcome you folks back, and we'll talk about the individual players in this. We'll have a brief section on the mailbag, and I'll give you my defensive MVPs for the game. But we'll get right to it. And, big game for the Ravens, obviously. I'll talk briefly now about their path to the number one seed, because the Ravens have three different primary ways they can get there. So way number one, they can win all three of their games. So that's all the ways they can win 3-0. They all get the Ravens the number one seed. Not surprisingly, the Ravens do have their destiny in their own hands. What is a little bit of surprising to some people in Baltimore is that Miami also has its destiny in their own hands. If they win all three, they get the number one seed, regardless of what else the Ravens may do, even if they go 2-1. If they lose to Miami and Miami wins all three, then Miami will get the one seed. Now let's talk about what happens if the Ravens go 2-1. They get the number one seed in every instance where Miami has at least one loss. It could be to the Ravens or it could be to somebody else. And Miami plays Buffalo, Dallas, and the Ravens in their final three games. So I think this is probably the Ravens' most likely path to the number one seed, is to win 2 out of 3. Maybe they lose this week in San Francisco. Maybe they lose against Miami. It'd be really nice if they could win both of those and have it sealed up before week 18. So they didn't have to play against the Steelers, or could even ditch the game intentionally to the Steelers to get the Steelers in and keep a team like, say, Buffalo out of the playoffs would be pretty spectacularly good. So the Ravens, if they win 2 out of 3, then Miami has to lose one game. It could come to the Ravens, or it could be either of the other two games, and very likely in there that would be the result. But that's not the only way. The Ravens can get the number one seed even with only one win. They have to have a few chips fall the right ways for that. They have to have all of the following. They need one loss by the Chiefs. That's going to be a little bit of a tough nut. The Chiefs have 3 games they should be favored in. One loss by the Browns. Same thing, but the Browns have a little bit tougher schedule, I think. And then they either need to beat Miami, which would do it, satisfy this third condition, or Miami has to lose both of their games to Dallas and Buffalo. Definitely a possibility that they would lose both those games after beating the Ravens. But the easiest way, if they win 1 out of 3, is just take that Miami game. If the Chiefs and Browns lose, and that could actually happen by the end of next week, where the Ravens have only won one game, the Chiefs and the Browns have both lost, and the Ravens know they've got it already. Even if they drop yet another game and finish at 12-5, they could have it. So they're the 3 primary ways. It may be possible for them to do it with no wins the rest of the way. I haven't really investigated that closely, but it's does not seem like it would be possible, because it would not be possible, because Miami then would have them beat, because Miami would go 1-2. They would catch up a game on the Ravens, and they would have them. So it's 1, 2, or 3 wins could possibly do it, and 2 wins is probably the one where they have the highest stack of probability. If you look out on the DVOA-based playoff odds, which are sitting out there, and they're updated through, it looks like 12/18 now. The Ravens sitting with a 67.6% chance to get the 1 seed. Interesting, maybe. Jacksonville dropping to 8-6. They lost any possibility of getting the 1 seed. So the AFC South will not have the number 1 seed this year. Golf claps for that. We're down to Kansas City now, who's got a shot at it, 10.3%, and Miami at 20.7%. And the darkest of dark horses, the Cleveland Browns at 1.3%, are still not eliminated from that number 1 seed possibility. So if they come back and take the division, they would have a shot at it, obviously. Cleveland, in order to take the division, the Ravens' magic number right now is 2. So over the remaining 6 outcomes, any combination of 2 in the Ravens' favor, meaning a Cleveland loss or a Baltimore win, clinches the division. That's obviously very important in terms of getting a home game, at least for the first game. If they play a 2 seed, they'll get 2 home games to start the playoffs, which would also be very nice. So, multiple ways that the Ravens could get some positive seeding results. They obviously really want that number 1 seed. They're in position to get it. If they got the number 2 seed, which is the next highest probability of things that would happen, it would be disappointing if they had to go to Arrowhead or even to Miami to play the AFC Championship. But on the other hand, being the number 2 seed has substantially more advantage than being the number 3 seed. So something to consider. And I know everybody at this time of year wants to know what's going to clinch the playoff spot for the Ravens. So with the magic number of 2 in the division, they actually can clinch the division title with a Ravens win and a Browns loss this weekend. So if they go into San Francisco and win, and the Browns lose at the same time, I forget who the Browns are even playing, then the Ravens will take the division title come Monday morning anyway. So let's talk about some individual performances in this game. So, I do not want to belittle the performance of the defense in this game in any way. I thought they played very well. Anytime you give up 7 points to Jacksonville on the road, that's clearly a very well-played game. I think there's some questions come up about, did Jacksonville really shoot themselves in the foot multiple times that are fair? One of the things that came out of this game is Jacksonville had 3 false starts on offense. Think about what would happen had Jacksonville come into Baltimore and had 3 false starts on offense. There would be all sorts of a mountain made about that being Ravens crowd noise. And, I think that was actually true in the last Ravens home game in that half-empty, rainy stadium when the Rams had 3 significant false start penalties that really hurt them. But in this game, I thought there was not a lot of good reason for Jacksonville to have false starts on offense in their home ballpark, and yet they were able to make that happen. And thanks very much to them. They had some bad plays at the end of the half. Clearly, that misery is something I wouldn't want to live through as a Ravens fan. Certainly, the ball being thrown to the outside there on after the ball was down at the 5-yard line with just a few seconds left to play in the half. They didn't have time to get reset. Marcus Williams made a great inbounds tackle. Enormous gift from the Jaguars on that play. They really need to throw the ball into the end zone, have 2 shots at that. I can't believe that they really thought 1 shot to the outside plus a potential of getting out of bounds was going to be better than 2 chances to the end zone. And I understand, by the way, if they don't want to spike that ball, I'm perfectly fine. If I'm a Jaguars fan, I'm perfectly fine if Lawrence runs up the line of scrimmage, throws the ball into the end zone right away with the hope of getting a completion, and if it goes incomplete or he can't find a receiver, throws it out of the end zone, and you live to have 1 more snap there. I would understand that completely, but I thought the Jags did the Ravens quite a favor at the end of the half in terms of that silliness. The number of drops, of course, by the Jaguars, very significant in this game. There have been a number of games in the past where I find myself writing a similar defensive article. And almost always in the past, it's dealt with a game against the Cleveland Browns, where the Browns have just made so many mistakes of this type. And the Browns are now better as a franchise. They're not in that same position anymore, but, going back to the mid-teens and the late aughts in terms of the number of times the Browns shot themselves in the foot multiple times. That's what this game looked like from Jacksonville. And it's not like the Ravens didn't put them in this fear of their defense that made them make some mistakes. So some of these, they seemed like unforced errors and they might have been forced errors. Okay, I'll buy some of that. But it was an awful lot of mistakes that Jacksonville made in this game to help the Ravens along and get it done. Let's talk about some individual players here. I'm going to start on the defensive line, talk about Justin Madubuike because he's the one I know everybody wants to hear about. So let's get to him right off the bat. 4 more quarterback hits in this game. He had 5 against the Rams, 1 sack in each game. What we're seeing now happen with Madubuike is a guy take over as a finisher in a way I cannot recall the Ravens having in a very long time. The last really great finisher I remember for the Ravens, Michael McCrary, would be in this category as a guy who just had super high motor and was always continuing to play. Madubuike, for a defensive lineman, very rare high-end motor in terms of keeping up. He's benefiting a lot from these early pressures. In this game, Adafe Owe contributed to the intentional grounding non-sack that Madubuike got earlier in the game. You can see Madubuike really wanted that one to count as a sack too, but it was even almost seemingly petitioning the officials for that to be the case. But it was effectively a sack for all intents and purposes. And then, of course, when he did pick up his sack, he was actually blocked for most of that play. Patrick Queen got in on the play, forced Lawrence up in the pocket. Madubuike discarded his opposite number and made the sack there in a very nice close and a great finish that extended the sack streak. Madubuike now sacks in 11 consecutive games. That's the single season NFL record. It ties it. Chris Jones is the other. Actually, there's three players who've done it. Chris Jones, Trey Hendrickson, and Justin Madubuike are the three players who've done it in a single season. If you go back to players who've done it over multiple seasons, Javon Curse had 12 in a row, 10 in 1999 to close up the season, and 2 more in 2000. So that's the only mountain left to climb for Justin Madubuike at this point in terms of that sack record. Just extraordinarily impressive. He was on the field a lot and still was effective. Unbelievably, that's something I really haven't seen as much, and it's something that I don't want to become wedded to a position, but I did think that Madubuike needed to play less snaps in total this year and would be more effective doing so because of two things. He'd been more effective in the games he played less snaps last year, and he'd also been less effective as the season went on. Well, we're not really seeing that same phenomenon this year. We're seeing Madubuike adapt and play extremely well, thrive with a extended snap responsibility. So it's great. It's very good for the defensive line as a whole. And I don't know that I could probably conjecture, but I don't know that I can really pick the reason why I think he's doing better in this case. I mean, he could be better conditioned. There could be reasons why he's his body's at a different level this year. But I think one of the things is he's just benefiting from closing to such a degree that has been remarkable. So been very positive on what's happened with Madubuike this year, and hopefully they can ride him through right to the Super Bowl, and we'll have to see what happens with the contract after that. We've talked extensively about that on Friday Morning GM, so I don't need to cover it here, but I think the safety net solution for the Baltimore Ravens is going to be having him play on the tag next year, even though a lot of money will have to be moved around in order to do that. I think I would say now more likely than not will be a Baltimore Raven. And if he is going to be moved, I think it's much more likely that he goes the tag and trade route than the compensatory pick route. So one thing the Ravens can do, which is really nice, is to sign him to the tag, and instead of getting 2025 draft capital for him, they could get more and 2024 draft capital for him. That's what the Ravens, they desperately need that. So, while it seems like there's no way in hell we want to let Madubuike go, and I certainly don't as a fan, just enjoying his style of play, the way he's so complementary with the other guys who've been getting first pressures on this team, and some of the ones he's generated himself. It would be a huge hole to try and fill if he were not here. But on the other hand, the Ravens may get an offer they just simply can't pass up. They may get a number one pick that's in the top half of the first round, or maybe no lower than about number 20. And if they did that, they could solve the left tackle issue, for example. And while the Ravens will have a need on the defensive line pretty much no matter what next year, it would be nice to both have the money back and a first round pick in exchange for Madubuike if someone is willing to pay that. So it'll be interesting. I think if he gets the franchise tag, it does not necessarily mean he will play for the Ravens, but I do think it's the safety net, and I think the Ravens will franchise him when the season is over. And I'll probably talk to Voss more about that on the next Friday Morning GM. Other people on the defensive line, Brent Urban, another fine game, and he has played some great football right now this year. He's in his 10th year, and he is really playing well. Had a couple good plays. One really good run stop for a loss of 2, where he discarded his opponent fairly handily, shed him quickly, and another one where he dropped to cover, and he did something. It's very interesting. He looked behind him, which I do not normally see defensive linemen or linebackers do. They want to keep their eyes on the quarterback, and they want to see when they drop from coverage where he's looking to try and figure out where the player is. Well, he tried to figure out where the receiver was by turning backwards. I don't know if that's really the proper technique or not, but regardless of the thing, he had an effect on Lawrence. Lawrence was trying to shoot the ball over to the right. I'm forgetting who the receiver there was. It was Jones or Washington or who it might have been, but he intentionally threw the ball wide of Urban, where Urban did not even appear to be ready to react to a ball thrown in the lane directly to the receiver on that play. So exceptional play, and really nice to see him make a couple big plays in this game. He's been playing a lot of kind of low, what do I want to call it? Recognition snaps. He's playing a lot of uncovered end. In the previous week against the Rams, they needed a way to have something other than the base defense on there to have him play effectively on the end of the line of scrimmage as an outside linebacker would, with only one outside linebacker in the game. I thought he did a good job of that, even though it didn't really show up in the statistics while he was in the game. I thought he personally did a solid job at that. So anyways, he definitely does not play high drama snaps or the high leverage snaps for the Ravens. He plays a lot of first downs and some second downs. But it's great to see him having a really effective season, and couldn't be happier for him. Travis Jones is in the game, and he had an up and down game. 2 missed tackles in this game. As you look at it from PFF, one of them was at the line of scrimmage, and it was definitely a missed tackle. Another one I thought was a little bit ticky-tack in terms of if you look at the various services for missed tackles, PFF is very tough, and if you look at PFR, which is another service that has missed tackles, they're much easier, and generally PFR total missed tackles will be many fewer. So PFF, if you basically could have had a shot at the guy on the ankle, then they pretty much hit you with a missed tackle, and other services they're not nearly as harsh with the players. But anyway, Travis Jones did have a couple pressures in the game. His let me make sure I have him for the same number of pressures. I actually have Travis Jones for 0 pressures, but what that probably means is that he had late pressures where he flushed Lawrence. He moved Lawrence after 3 seconds. And I don't give him credit for a pressure for those, but those plays are still important. The other possibility is he might have been involved in getting close to Lawrence and flushing him from the pocket. One thing I did notice with Travis Jones is they were playing him a lot more on the passing downs early in the game, as opposed to having Pierce in there. Now, Pierce and Matabike have been like peanut butter and jelly this season in terms of playing together. And they did some of that in this game. But Jones, for instance, on the first drive was in there on 3rd and 6 with Matabike when the drive got shut down. On the second drive is 3rd and 12, 2nd and 12. Jones and Matabike were together. The third drive, the 3rd and 6 where they got off the field, it was Jones and Matabike together. So I think we may be seeing a little bit of a change of the guard here in terms of how they want to deal with those 2 players and get Jones more of the obvious pass rushing snaps with Matabike. But Matabike and Pierce, as I mentioned, just been playing together the whole year in a way that's been fairly remarkable. By the way, I thought Michael Pierce had a good game here. Stopped the run effectively. He was manhandling his opponents largely. Both Luke Fortner, the center, and each guard had a lot of trouble blocking Michael Pierce. But it's interesting that he's not being used in exactly the same role that he has for most of the season, and you really notice it right away. I mean, number 98's in there. It can be a little bit difficult to notice the difference between 98 and 58, but it's amazing. Travis Jones is a relatively lean big man, whereas Michael Pierce is a I will use my body as a weapon against you, big man. Who's much, much bigger in terms of his girth and also some of the other positive things that go along with that. And you can't tell the difference, but it's 58 and 98. So sometimes I'm looking at the number and I catch the 8, but I can't see for sure who it is, and I have to wait for the play to play out to really tell the difference between the two. Let's move on to the inside linebacker group. Kind of another disappointing game from Patrick Queen. Had 3 missed tackles. There's no doubt about it. All of these I would have called missed tackles as well. One of them was on the sack that Matabike eventually got. So he was in there first, had a chance in that sack, and didn't put it away. The only thing I can say is I think Queen is really hurting his market value with these missed tackles. He's still going to make a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But there's a couple of market currents that are going against him that are really unfortunate from the Ravens' perspective. Obviously the Ravens want him to get paid as much as possible, I think, if he's moving on. And you want market forces to be directing that, since they have, they're going to need the money from Matabike or to make other moves. Maybe it's Kevin Zeitler is who they can afford in terms of keeping that offensive line together. But Patrick Queen, I think, is hurting his value with some of these missed tackles, and he's had quite a few missed tackles the last few weeks. I just want to go through this and look at this. He's got 18 missed tackles by PFF. Again, that's a tough source the whole year. The first 6 weeks of the year, he only had 3. So he's had 15 missed tackles in the last 8 games. That is just unacceptable for a inside linebacker. That's part of the job description, is you got to be a top quality tackle. He's ended up missing almost 15% of his tackles for the year, which is not good. And he's still doing some positive things. He's rushing the passer. He fell on the fumble in this game, which is really nice. So there's definitely some positive things happening. His quickness, the Ravens can really make use of in a lot of ways. He's a good guy to run down plays to the outside. So he's part of the Ravens' horizontal strength they've had this year. As Queen has been a guy, but the missed tackles are costing him some money, and that's unfortunate. So we'll see how that works out the rest of the year. Roquan Smith had a really big game. Lots of downhill tackling, particularly in the passing game, to limit yards after the catch. And it seems like so many times per game where there's a throw in the middle of the field, and usually it's in that 2-3-4 area. I'm sorry. The 2-3-4 are columns. Let me just go over this once, since I don't think I've done this in a while. But I divide the field into 5 strips that are vertical to the field. A 1 is outside the left numbers. A 2 is between the left numbers and the left hash. A 3 is between the 2 hashes. A 4 is between the numbers and the right hash. And then a 5 is outside of the right numbers. So 2, 3, and 4 are the typical area that you might think of an inside linebacker as roaming. Typically, their short zones are going to be in that area. Their coverage in terms of drops, they have to manage their depth well to make sure that they don't give up a lot of throws between level 2 and level 3. And part of what they need to then do is come downhill and make tackles, which can be a little bit challenging for them at times. But Roquan just has great instincts. We see that over and over again in terms of stopping people. A lot of times it's on a second down that he'll bring up that third down, but sometimes it's on a third down. And trying to throw short of the sticks in Roquan Smith's area this year has proved to be a fool's errand. He has been so remarkable at shutting down those plays and getting his team off the field. So huge addition for the Ravens. And I made the point, he's just been a much better player for the Ravens than he has been with the Bears. The things we hear about his leadership this year, they seem real. We seem to hear them. We seem to see them on the field. And when all the other players are basically telling you, that Roquan Smith is telling them, be accountable, be in the right place. And it just seems like whenever he walks to the microphone or whatever, very more or less a business-like demeanor. There's a little bit of swagger there, but he's much more business-like about how things are going, as opposed to other players who, wear their feelings on their sleeve in a lot of ways about how happy they are about what's going on and whatnot. And Roquan's always got this "we can never be too satisfied" kind of look about him that I've really appreciated about him as a player. I don't think it's overbearing in any way. I know in the Ray Lewis years, some people thought that the preacher Ray component of his leadership style was something that they didn't really appreciate. Joe Flacco often said, "I don't even understand what he's saying sometimes." But Roquan seems to be able to get the team fired up in a way similar to Ray before games, and it's great to see that, and really nice to know he's going to be with the Ravens for these next few years, leading this defense, because he's an outstanding player. Let's move on to the outside linebackers, talk about them for a little bit. Jadeveon Clowney, kind of a quiet night in terms of his rushing the passer. He had a couple of pressures, did not really contribute. I believe both his pressures were not contributing to other quarterback hits. Let me confirm that for a second here. He had a pressure on a pass that went for 4 yards. He had another pressure on what became the pass defensed in the back of the end zone by Hamilton. So that was a nice one. Maybe that was something where Lawrence's throw was impacted in some way, but I thought that was mostly Hamilton just getting a little piece of that football and making that ball juggleable in the back of the end zone, where it definitely created doubt over whether the receiver was in bounds, was ruled out of bounds in the end zone, and that was obviously a big play for the Ravens to be able to get off the field shortly after that, 2 plays after that, and for the last time, as it turned out. But Clowney's still having a big year. As I said in a lot of the discussion in the first part of the show, that Lawrence did not really allow for pressure to develop in this game very much, and it was to his own detriment. So threw for 3.8 yards per play on 20 ball out quick plays. Okay, that's just not very good. Probably normal would be in the 5.5 to 6 range, even against the Ravens. I think that a lot of teams have been over 5 yards per play on those ball out quick throws. Remember, all your sacks are taken out of that, so you certainly better throw for 5 yards per throw when you take out your sacks. And this was a game that the Jags just had too many balls lost. They had tackles that ended up being made for loss or for very little gain on those pass plays to the outside. Just a lot of things went wrong for the Jags in terms of the balls that came out quickly in this game. And I thought that the trade-off that Lawrence decided upon may have been health related, or keep people off his legs. Gianna actually is the one who mentioned this in the first part of the show, but also that if you look at his results, he really damaged the Ravens when he got ample time and space for almost 10 yards per throw. And he also was very effective when pressure occurred. If you put those two together, he had about 7.6 yards per throw on the combination of pressures and ample time and spaces, which was twice as good as the ball out quick results. So my point being that if you're making a choice between taking a chance on pressure or pressure or an ATS versus taking the quote unquote sure thing of a ball out quick, then you probably, given the way the Ravens defense was playing in this game, he was better served to take the gamble, hold the ball a little longer. And especially when you consider the fact that the times he left the pocket are going to be times where probably there was pressure that forced it, or there was at least time from an ATS pocket that encouraged it. And not that he left, immediately on some sort of design run. I didn't really notice any of those from Lawrence in this game. I can't remember a single design run. So if you think about it that way, a lot of the damage he did to the Ravens on the ground, and he was their leading rusher, if I recall correctly, he had 40 yards or so. That really came off taking that gamble for ATS or pressure as opposed to taking a sure thing ball out quick. So I thought that he really did the Ravens a big favor in that regard. I think the Ravens probably realized that they didn't want to give up high value ball out quick throws, and they did some things to try and discourage that in this game. The primary one being, dropping people from the line of scrimmage in simulated pressure and not bringing blitzes from off ball. So when you bring a blitz from off ball, you're basically waving a red flag at Trevor Lawrence, telling him, here's the hot read, here's the hot read, here's the hot read. Kind of like, Homer Simpson, all he can have in his mind is eat the pudding, eat the pudding, eat the pudding. But you're telling him, throw the ball right there to that open spot on the field, and it makes his job a little easier. And the Ravens didn't do a lot of that. They only rushed the quarterback with an off-ball blitz 6 times across 5 plays. So they did very little of that, and I thought that was a good choice. So we're talking about the outside linebackers. Let's move on. Harrison came back and played his first game back, was in there for 9 snaps. All of them were in the base defense. So that's pretty much all he plays at this point. All were first or second downs with the one exception. He had a 3rd and 1 play that he was in for. 1 2nd and 4. Really, it's 1 second down and 1 third down as far as I can see here. So the Ravens miss him, I think, in that role. And more than that, they miss the fact that that's 9 snaps that he and Robinson can play, and the primary 3 edge rushers don't have to play. So let's do a little math here. They were on the field for 61 snaps that resulted in a play, as opposed to a not a penalty, a play. So 122 outside linebacker snaps were required. If you can get 18 out of the combination of Tavius Robinson and
if you found a $100 bill on the ground, you wouldn't walk past it. So don't pass up on a chance at easy cash with MyBookie. MyBookie has the biggest online selection of odds and contests to fill all your sports betting needs anytime, anywhere. So you can turn that sports knowledge into cash in your wallet. Bet the NFL, college bowl games, or play for a share of big cash prizes in weekly blackjack tournaments. And if you've been waiting for the right time to get in on the action, that time is now. Make your winning move today. Sign up at MyBookie and use the promo code RAVENS to claim your deposit match, redeemable up to $1,000. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your bonus. Experience the thrill of sports betting right from the comfort of your home. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
Harrison, and let me see if Robinson even played that many, because he didn't start the game. So I think he was actually a little bit of that. He played 7. So they got 16 of those 122 snaps taken care of by those 2 guys. That is a not insignificant contribution of 13% of the snaps taken away that you don't have to find by one of those other top 3 players. So those guys end up having to play an average of about 62% of the snaps each. And given that the total snap number was fairly low, I thought that was a manageable number. Had the snap number been higher, we might have seen some more of Robinson in particular, mixed in on some later downs. I know they did a little bit more of that in the Rams game when they had an overtime game and some more snaps. So they got him on the field for more. Harrison, of course, wasn't active. Moon was active for this game. As a 6th outside linebacker. They never used him defensively, so he was only in there really for special teams. A little surprising, because I think they've got other guys who could do that special teams role, who are maybe a safety or a corner or something, but they didn't make the choice to go with that in this game. Odafe Owe, quiet game in terms of the stat sheet. Had a terrific game, actually. 5 pressures, as I counted them. Those are 5 pressures within 3 seconds. None of them led to or were a quarterback knockdown in their own right, but he had pressure to help phone booth the pocket on the quarterback hit that became the intentional grounding by Madubuike. So the one where Madubuike lost his sack streak extension early, but it left them at the 1 yard line punting. Really big play in the game to get the pressure and close the front door in that one. Then he had, he had 1, 2, 3, and he had another quarterback hit on the 3rd play of the game that he contributed to another Madubuike quarterback hit. So he's definitely doing his part. I kind of made the point with Madubuike is about as great a closer as the Ravens have seen in a very long time, and I'd have to think about who else other than McCrary really fits into that mold. But terrific job for Owe getting some first pressures in this game. We're starting to see some great moves from Owe. Really likes the spin move. Probably should be continuing to work on additional moves. So he can really develop a pass rush arsenal. But Walker Little did not have a real good chance against Odafe Owe in this game. What kept Odafe Owe off the quarterback was Lawrence getting rid of the ball quickly. So that was one of the choices in how the Jaguars went about their offensive scheme. But definitely Owe was very effective in the game regardless. Van Noy definitely had some good plays as well. Had 3 pressures, as I count them. Again, did not get the quarterback on the ground, but he also did some other positive things in terms of setting people up. Van Noy's been a terrific find, cheap as hell. Word on the street is that it was really a question of money during the offseason, that he thought he was worth more money. It turns out he is worth more money. He's just not getting it from the Ravens because he waited till during the season to sign. And we've made the point several times on the Friday Morning GM show that the Ravens have really plugged into something here where they're finding outside linebacker talent cheap from the bargain bin. And this is something that it would not surprise me if this is an area where they really want to try and continue the ride if they can make it happen. Hopefully the word won't be out next year, that a lot of these 31, 32-year-old outside linebackers who are available are guys you can still make good use of. But the Ravens system in particular and the way they have this complementary pass rush going has just worked out extremely well for Van Noy and Clowney this season in particular. So, and obviously we go back to Justin Houston last year, and even the contributions of Jason Pierre-Paul, while they weren't spectacular in terms of the stat sheet, were significant. And he came in, and not only did he rush the passer some, he also played the run something. He ate some important early down snaps for the Ravens. I don't really consider that a central characteristic of any of the three guys this year. I think the big three are all making their mark as pass rushers, and whatever they give you against the run is just kind of a bonus. None of them are really terrible run defenders, but they're making their mark as pass rushers. That's where their real value is, and I think the Ravens would probably go that way again if they're looking at what are the traits that we try and find in a cheap pass rusher. They want to find somebody who has some juice to make some primary moves, to occasionally create primary pressure, and let the rest of this defensive line and the secondary, for that matter, eat off the fact that they're getting some initial pressure. So he's done the job, and I've been very happy with how Van Noy has played. Got a surprise during the game to see Jalen Armour-Davis on the field. And he was in there on some, 3rd and 2, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 8, 2nd and 10, 1st and 10, 2nd and 10. Played 6 snaps in the second half. All of them were after the injury to Williams, and he was in there replacing Mollett on those snaps. Now, remember, if they went to a nickel in the second half, it had to be with Mollett or Armour-Davis in the game, because Hamilton had been moved back to strong safety from slot corner, and they had other options. They could have, brought in Worley at strong safety, which I think would have been perfectly fine as well, and used Hamilton, continued to use Hamilton in the slot where he'd been very effective, especially considering how this game rolled out. The fact that Lawrence was really continuing to throw underneath. It would have been interesting to try and have that extra horizontal defender in the form of Hamilton up front to do even more damage. But the Ravens were effective. They stopped them for 3.8 yards per play and on such snaps anyway. So I can't argue too much with what happened. And Hamilton made a couple plays on the back end too. Really nice PD in the end zone to help save a touchdown there. So can't be upset about that. We have not seen much of Darby. Darby didn't play at all in this game. He was in there on special teams. I saw him, obviously, but Yasin, not even active, healthy scratch again for another game. So it's interesting. These guys who got him through the early part of the season at left corner. So you had Stevens at right corner, and you had these two guys splitting time at left corner, and they played just some outstanding football to get him through, particularly Darby. But now it seems like Jalen Armour-Davis is ahead of Yasin on the cornerback depth chart, which is an amazing turn of events, frankly, based on how these guys were signed during the offseason as what was expected of them. That Rock Yasin was going to be more of a guy who'd hold down one corner spot, and you hope for the best until at least Humphrey comes back, and maybe even after that. So the way this has worked out with Stevens being the team's number one corner, Humphrey returning and playing every snap now, and both Darby and Yasin being out of work has been very surprising to me. So anyway, it is what it is, and it's nice to have depth at corner, and the Ravens may still need it at some point this season. Marlon Humphrey, outstanding game He got called Marion Humphrey, I believe, by Chris Collinsworth, who was not able to read his card. It was actually kind of funny to hear that happen because you know exactly what's happened. It says Marion, and he's got a speck of food on it or something. He's reading it wrong. And how can you read your card for a player like Marlon Humphrey? You know his name is not Marion, but anyway, it was an interesting kind of thing that happened. Humphrey did not allow a single big play in the game. Really looked outstanding back at home. Couple 9-yard throws on the sideline were all he allowed. One time with Hamilton underneath, and he was over the top. He came down, stuck him for no gain after the catch, so that's nice. Another time for 9 yards again, 9+0 on the right sideline, and I swear the receiver in that play had to go up into the air. I don't remember if it was Zay Jones or it was Ridley, but it was one of those two. And they went up for the ball, and it looked to me like Humphrey could have carried him right out of bounds, which I believe that is a legitimate force-out methodology. If the receiver cannot get his feet down and tap in bounds, there are no rules against force-outs now, so I don't believe the distance plays any factor in that. So, if you pick him up 5 yards from the sideline and you can manage to get him out of bounds without him getting both feet down, that's still an incomplete pass. But on the play, the receiver did manage to get both feet down in bounds as he was falling out of Humphrey's arms for a 9-yard gain. But very physical play by Humphrey. It's great to see him attacking the receiver like that. The other play, which was truly exceptional, was on the second to last play of the game, where Humphrey delivered the pass defense on the right sideline from the Jaguars' perspective. So he was out there at left cornerback again. I'll swear that looked like Jimmy Smith in Super Bowl 47 to me. Jimmy Smith took Crabtree's head off basically on that final 3-play stand, 2nd and 5, 3rd and 5, 4th and 5 that I've talked about many times. But the hit on Crabtree and what Jimmy Smith did on that 3-play sequence really was made him the defensive MVP of that Super Bowl in a lot of ways, and remarkable play there for Humphrey as well, and just even to evoke that memory, it's very special. Same spot on the field, same approximate yard line on the field. Humphrey came at him and nearly beheaded him in a similar manner, and the game has changed. Last 11 years. They've taken a lot of that stuff out of the game, so it wasn't flagged, and I thought the Ravens were actually kind of lucky that did not draw a flag in that particular situation, because it definitely looked like Humphrey went into him pretty hard. But great game from Marlon. It's good to see him back playing some good football, man. It'll be so important for the postseason to have Marlon playing at a high level where you can really trust your corners on both sides, because the Ravens will have other difficulties they have to work through, whether it's injuries we don't know about yet, continue to figure out the slot corner situation, whether they can move Hamilton back there, find somebody else they like on the back end, leave it to Williams and Stone if Williams recovers. But they'll have problems they have to deal with, and depth at that position, very important, and it starts by having your starters be guys you can completely trust. Arthur Mollett, not his best game. A couple big catches. It was unfortunate. By the way, Humphrey, in terms of stats in this game, allowed 3 of 8 balls to be caught for 23 yards. So he allowed a 7-yard catch where he allowed -1 yak, and 2 9-yard catches where he allowed 0 yak. So I believe the total, and I don't know if PFF will back this up, but that's how I charted it, had 3 of 8 balls thrown his way were complete. So Marlon Humphrey playing at a very high level. Arthur Mollett, a little more difficulty. He has had trouble. Now, I'm not ready to completely say who was responsible for the wheel route on Agnew that got lost off the left sideline. But what it looked like to me right off the line of scrimmage is there was a pre-snap communication between Mollett and Stevens, who was on that same side. Stevens then took the rubbing receiver off on that play, one of the 2 receivers that are crossing each other, let's put it that way, and took him to the inside of the field. So I don't think Stevens had responsibility for that. So the question is, should there have been another safety back there? Was Stone late to the play or whatnot? It did appear a little strange that Mollett did not try and stay with Agnew. Now, Agnew is quick, so it would have been a difficult assignment for him, but you try and take away some of the strike zone for Lawrence in terms of the catch radio for Agnew. He's not a huge player, and make it so that it's a more difficult catch and a more difficult throw, and that often will force the quarterback to adjust and throw that ball a little bit differently. But in this case, Agnew just got away scot-free, easiest throw imaginable, and then Agnew makes a fairly simple move on Stone. I don't really blame Stone for that. Obviously, Agnew reads leverage pretty well. He's a kick returner for starters. That really is a very nice attribute to have in a kick returner. And we saw in this game, just he was fairly effective returning a couple of kickoffs against the Ravens. I thought that he did a very good job of waiting for Stone to get the leverage on the wrong foot when he made his move, and then he's just much too quick and was gone before Stone could react to it. So I wouldn't call it a missed tackle really in that particular case by Stone. It would have been very difficult for him to maintain any kind of leverage, and to do so, he probably would have had to give up significant yards down the sideline, maybe another 20 or so. So maybe it ends up being they get the ball at the 10-yard line instead of scoring, but it would have still been an enormous play for maybe 55 yards instead of 65, even if he'd made every decision, optimally relative to Agnew on that play. So anyway, I'm not 100% sure it was Maulet's fault, and I'm not 100% sure that Stone has something. So I'm going to take a little more time to review that play and maybe talk about it again later in the week. Brandon Stevens, another pretty darn good game. Really ticky-tack DPI call against him, I thought, but otherwise I thought he played pretty well. He did give up a fairly substantial play during the game. I think it was for 28 yards. Am I thinking about him? No, that wasn't him. That wasn't him. So I have to look back at the coverage for this game and remind myself of what other plays he gave up in this game. So 36-yard play. That's the one. So that one came in it was the second to last play of the first half when they got the 36-yard play to get right down to the 5-yard line. And so Zay Jones got behind him on that left sideline, made the catch falling down. The good news was Stevens got up right on top of him. Stevens was in the right place on the subsequent play to allow Williams to make his move downhill and make that nice inbounds tackle. I think that was on Parker Washington by that left sideline. That was just one of the biggest gifts the Jaguars could bestow upon the Ravens a week before Christmas. That was really special. I have no idea why you throw that ball anywhere but in the end zone. But I heard from Gianna in the first part of the show that the Ravens knew it was coming, at least according to Harbaugh. So that's an interesting call. And Williams certainly was in the right place to deal with it, rolled over him, took a hit for the team in terms of a groin injury on the play, which is very unfortunate because the Ravens really could use Marcus Williams on the back end of their secondary the rest of the year and into the playoffs as well. But they may have to be without him for a game or two now with another injury showing up. So hopefully during that time that pec heals a little bit as well. Geno Stone, a little bit of a tough day in terms of tackling. He's had some problems with that this year. I think he's fine on the back end. I think that he's a ball hawk primarily. He's a tackle secondarily. And one of the reasons that I was kind of supposing you leave Hamilton on the back end to play strong safety is that you really need to have one good tackler back there. So if you don't have that with Stone, and I think that Stone's had difficulty this year in terms of stringing together good tackling games, then you really need to have somebody like Hamilton back there to be the guy who finishes plays off. And they do have Daryl Worley as well, who I believe has been perfect as a tackler this year, pretty close to it. I would think he'd be a guy they would give another shot to in the back end. The other guy they have is Adams, the ex-Bear and several of the teams, New England maybe player, who could come in on the back end as well. And allow Hamilton to play up front. Just Hamilton's value as a horizontal defender, I am in love with, obviously, in terms of what he can do for you at the line of scrimmage. And so I'm loath to move him to the back end, even though in this game, hey, he made some big plays for the Ravens on the back end. I just think he was probably even better on on the front side. So we'll see how this plays out and how the Ravens will adjust in terms of if they have to spend time without Williams for any extended period. They have gone to a big nickel look for most of their plays when they've had all three of their primary safeties healthy, and Mollett only for a smattering of plays here and there, but not very frequently on the field. That'll take care of the individual players. I'll go through my MVPs fairly quickly here. The guys I have from 3 to 1 are in the article, if you read that, so you're ahead of me there. But the number 3 guy, Marlon Humphrey, and I just talked extensively about what he did, but only 3 of 8 completions against him for 23 yards. That's less than 3 yards a target. You'll take that. And great to see the number 1 corner playing like the number 1 corner again. Number 2, Kyle Hamilton. Lots of good plays up close to the line of scrimmage. He wasn't perfect. He'd get blocked in the run game some. He was attributed with at least one additional pass defense that was more than what he got, but he actually was in there diving to try and impact throws. Some of them he made it happen. Some of them he didn't. He had bracket coverage unusually on the underneath side by the sideline with Humphrey on top of the play. And just very good about knowing when he can take a chance to undercut the route and try and make a deflection. That was one of those opportunities. It didn't work out. There's another one where he dove in the end zone to try and stop a ball that was threaded in very well to Ridley. And as far as I can see on that play, it was more or less a ball that was a combination of just thrown a little too low and Ridley couldn't dig it out. But I don't believe either Ravens defender touched it. Mollett was trailing the play. And Hamilton closed the window effectively, but he didn't touch the ball, I don't believe. I think that was all on Ridley. Might have been some alligator arms from Ridley trying to not get hit on the play, but definitely I don't think it was Hamilton that made the play on the ball. And then number 1, Justin Madubuike, pretty easy choice again. He's living the life right now, and we're all just living in his world right now. It's an incredible job he has done to be a closer and a finisher on pressure, and he's so valuable to the Ravens in that regard. I have, over the last couple of weeks in particular, I'm switched over to the notion that the Ravens pretty much have to franchise him. I don't think it means they have to have him play, but they have to at least get more value than just a simple compensatory pick at it. I think he's worth more. I think somebody will give more for him. And whoever trades for him will get an opportunity to sign Madubuike to a multi-year deal, and they probably will trade some significant value in addition to that to get him, because he's a very special player, and it'd be unfortunate. I think, at most, I think it's going to be difficult anyway to sign him to a long-term deal that's specific to the Ravens, that they get him for 4 years or something and $90 million or something. I think it's going to be difficult to get that deal signed. So I think he does end up playing somewhere else, whether it's in 24 or in 25. And so 25, they would still have a compensatory pick. They could defer a year, which would be kind of nice, because they might be over the limit in terms of 25 compensatory picks if they were to lose him this offseason. But they also could potentially accelerate draft capital into 2024, which is something we've talked about various ways to do it. But I think actually tagging and trading Madubuike might be one of the most likely ways that they could actually gain anything significant, because there is no miraculous, Browns draft day movie way to generate a lot of draft capital that's going to happen at the snap of the fingers, or even with any combination of moves. And most of them are, you're trading value for value, and it's basically, if you're not giving up a player or not trading a lot of future capital, you won't gain a lot of capital in 24. So it has to really be a player, and it would have to be a player like Madubuike, that they have clear value created by the tag that they could then trade. So I'm not for it. I don't want to see him leave either. I want to see Justin Madubuike wear a Ravens uniform for the rest of his career, if possible. The Ravens just may not be in a position to make that work, and it may be that tag and trade is the alternative that makes the most sense. Let me see what I've got in terms of the mailbag here. I know we had at least one or two good questions over here that I wanted to get to, and indeed we do. Let's go first to the question by Kevin Longshore at Andrew C. 410 something or other. How significant would having a meaningless game against the Steelers Week 18 be for managing defensive line snaps going into the playoffs, particularly if they had the bye? Do you think there would be notable benefit? All right, so I think you can look at this in a couple different ways. They certainly, the defensive line is one of the groups that potentially could benefit, but in order for them to benefit, somebody else has to come up and play those Week 18 snaps. So to the best of my knowledge, they only really have one guy, and that'd be Rashad Nichols, who's really ready to play in an NFL game. And so they're still going to have a significant number of defensive line snaps taken by people who are currently among the Big Five, because they haven't expanded the group at all. Now, they could sign somebody before then, but if you're talking about specifically for the defensive line, I kind of think that that's one of the least impacted groups. That if they got into that Week 18 game, first of all, they might very well be trying to lose it, whether they'll admit that or ever publicly. They'd probably rather be boiled in oil than admit they try and lose a game to the Steelers to get the Bills out of the playoffs. But that could legitimately be the circumstances they find themselves in. I think they would try and run the game and get the game over quickly. I think they would use it as an opportunity to get Malik Cunningham in the game and get some QB snaps for the first time. But I honestly believe the defensive line would not be the beneficiary to any great degree. And the more you try and tank a game like that, the more you probably leave the Steelers with a number of offensive snaps, more offensive snaps than they would otherwise have. So I don't think I don't think the defensive line would actually be the one to benefit. But great question, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Who else do we have here? We have AngeLove85. Now, this one, I was not sure I could understand the question earlier, so let me see if I got it. It seems to me that one of the weaknesses of the defense is inconsistency in stopping the run. Do you believe it is scheme, like Dallas, who is built to stop the pass, or fatigue? A game like Buffalo from yesterday can kill the defense. Hashtag Filmstudy mailbag. Okay, so I kind of been talking about this regularly from week to week. I don't think it's a matter of the Ravens can't stop the run. I think they can still stop the run very effectively if they choose to stop the run. I think they choose to stop the pass, and they choose to stop the pass by starting in these two high shells where they can confuse the hell out of the opposing quarterback, make very few quarterbacks really want to throw the ball deep, and force them into playing a lot of small ball. So the other side of that coin is that because they start in these two deep shells, they're effectively waving a red flag at the offense saying, run the ball against me. And they've been very effective doing it to the tune of 4.5 yards a carry. And I believe that's without the spikes removed. I'm just going to take a quick look on that. I've got that on my spreadsheet here. So this year they've allowed, 4.5 yards per carry when you take out the kneels, I should say, not the spikes. So 577 for 20. I'm sorry, that's not right. 324 for 1444 is how I get to 4.5 on that. They have 9 more kneels for a total of -8 yards that are built into that rush number that take it down to 4.3. So if you want the news as bad as it is, it's 4.5 yards a carry. I still don't think that's that terrible. I think it's very hard to move the ball down the field against a team even at that kind of rate. And if you look at the Ravens of past years, we've often been frustrated by exactly that fact, that the Ravens would make a mistake for much of the Lamar era, fumble the football or something else would go wrong that would keep them from realizing their full value of their run game, even though they're running for 4.5 yards per carry or sometimes more in terms of what they were doing. So, they're making this choice, and it's resulted in the best pass defense in team history. And while they've given up half a yard more than I'd be comfortable with giving away on the ground, they've saved more than that in terms of yards per pass play, created enormous amounts of variation against the pass that's extremely useful to get defenses off the field. Defenses need variance, so they need to see, you want penalties on the offense, you want strings of incomplete passes, you want turnovers, and you want sacks. And those are the 4 major tools you have to get the offense off the field. And when you can be generating the kind of sack rate the Ravens have, and a solid turnover rate in terms of interceptions, at least, and creating a fair number of offensive penalties as well against them. That's where they're deriving a lot of their high rate of series wins, meaning the individual series of downs wins that the Ravens have had this year. They're not quite the best in the league, but they're very close. The Browns are at a really remarkable level for that this year. But this is something that I think that the Ravens have made a conscious choice. I think it's a good choice. I think they'll continue. And I think McDonald, wherever he goes next, is probably going to take that with him. And if it'll be one of the acid tests you'll see is if he goes to the Bears or some other team next year, do they suddenly become a team that is happy giving up 4.5 yards per rush and all of a sudden becomes this incredible stalwart pass defense team? So we'll see how that works out. And hopefully McDonald won't be lost either next year, but it's one of the ways we kind of test our assumptions about this and see that happen. Thanks for the questions, guys. I will be talking about the offense tomorrow. It is supposed to be with James Ogden, which I'm really looking forward to. Our friend from the UK does a lot of things for Ravens UK, and we got the chance to meet him when we were in the game at the game in London. Very nice guy, extremely knowledgeable about football, and definitely somebody I want to talk to. So if you're listening to this episode and you want to put in your question on the offensive side of the ball, please do that. I'll be having that discussion in the afternoon tomorrow with him. So got to be pretty quick about getting your questions in, because I think it'll be around 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll be having that discussion. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I want to hear from you. If I can ask for one other thing, if you're listening this long, I really appreciate you being the kind of loyal listener you are. Take the time, if you would, to write a nice 50-word, 5-star review for us and go ahead and put that out on your favorite podcast app. Alternatively, show one other friend of yours, maybe an older person who doesn't deal with podcasts or just that's not their natural route. They like to read the paper, damn it, and they don't know about it. But maybe you can show them just how on their computer they can go right to the website and click the play button on the podcast section of filmstudybaltimore.com and just listen right there. If they're so inclined while they have time. Sometimes people just need to know a new way is out there to listen to the pod to give it a chance. And we rely on that word of mouth advertising, whether you're writing reviews or showing new people how to use the site. Well, thanks, folks, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.